Want to give you my alternative point of view on the Karlsson trade to Pittsburgh. We all know what the trade was. I won't bother going over that. There are other ways of thinking about this trade, and I've spent the last 2 weeks ruminating over them and really trying to look at the situation in a different way. Because as a Toronto fan, for 6 years, I've watched Dubas make these kinds of trades, and everyone gets very excited, but I think there's a lot of problems with this trade, just like there were in Toronto with a lot of his trades, especially thinking back to Tavares. So let's go through it and see a different way. It's more of a long-term thinking approach. Okay, let's see. Let's start with the positives. Dubas has dumped some bad contracts and some bad players. And he signed Karlsson, who got 101 points last year. The year before, he was at something like 50, and the year before, he was at 22. So he had injury problems. But if you look back through his career, he's a sort of 60 to 70 point guy. And that is similar to Letang. Now, with Pittsburgh, I wouldn't be surprised if he did much better in the regular season. And that's good. Those are all good things. So, where we start to have an issue is, of course, we're going to talk about the age. And there's a few ways of thinking about this. So Malkin is 37. He's got 3 years at $6 million. Crosby is 36. He's got one more year and his contract's up. And Letang is 36 and has 5 more years. That hurts. And then Karlsson's got 4 years at $10 million. So he will be 37 years old at $10 million a year when his contract is done. Okay, so there's a few things going on here. The current core are 8 years older than they were when they won the Cup. What are we talking, 2015, right? That's a lot of wear and tear, and that's a lot of slowing down in a top-tier professional hockey league. Now, people will say they haven't slowed down. But at 36 and 37, I think we all know that you're going to. Most players do. You have the outliers like Giordano in Toronto, who at 39 had a great season. But the chances over the next 3 or 4 years of those players slowing down are very high. And that means that the window for winning, let's say they start to slow down at Malkin in 2 years will be 39. Let's say he starts to slow down at 39. I mean, he's going to be 39. Like, he's got a 2-year window likely of top tier, top level playing, if that. Okay? So the problem in the thinking is, if we go back to last summer, we saw when Murray was signed in Toronto, everyone got all excited and said, Dubas is a genius because we've got a cup-winning goalie. And I said, no, we've got a goalie who helped win a cup 8 years ago and is now highly injury prone and not motivated and is being paid too much money. And if he makes it through the season into the playoffs, I'd be shocked. And that's what happened. And I'm saying the same thing about these older players. This year or next year, they're going to slow down. So, and the other thing is Karlsson, you're like, well, we got the Norris Trophy winner. And you're like, well, yes, but will he be again? Possibly. So I think it's overly optimistic. All right. So the trade, in my point of view, has to come good this year or next, which means they need a run. Now, the question no one's asked is, what is a successful outcome from this trade? Now, you may say, well, it doesn't matter, we got Karlsson, isn't that great? Well, no, hang on a second. You've traded away a first-round pick in the 2024 draft, a strong draft, and you've traded a second-round pick. The first-round pick is particularly interesting in a deeper draft because in the first round, you've got a 90% chance of getting a NHL player, and the chances of that player being a top 6 player are also pretty high. So what happens is you draft him in 2024, it takes 2, 3 years for them to get in the league. That's when the core from Pittsburgh have fallen off. And whoever's got that draft pick next year, San Jose, in 3 or 4 years will have a top NHL player likely, depending on how they draft. I mean, you can't say that exact player they got is exactly what Pittsburgh would have got if they had kept the pick. They might have gone a different direction. But you're mortgaging your future because in 3 or 4 years, you know the top 3 players are going to be too old and you're not going to have a pick to replace them. There's not someone coming up from the organization. So you're going to be left with a team with some cap space and a $10 million Karlsson who may or may not produce. Because if you look at his career, he's up and down. So, this is realistic. This is what I've said, similar things with the Leafs. So, 1 second. Right. So what is a win for this team? Is it a cup final? Yes, in the next 2 years, 3 years if possible. Is it a conference final for me? Yeah, I think that would be pretty good because it would be a fun playoff run for the fans. And a spectacular regular season, is that a win? Some fans in Toronto were happy with that. Most of us, especially ones who've been around for a while, wanted a playoff run, especially with that core. I would imagine with the core Pittsburgh has now, you guys want a playoff run. So is a fun regular season good? Yes. Is it the outcome you want? For me, I would say no. I would say lots of points in the regular season. Boston aren't really, what you want. What you want is a Florida run to the cup. That's what you want. Now, there are a lot of problems with that, but before we get into that, if the first and second round picks come good and Pittsburgh only makes it to the second round or the first round, that to me is a loss because San Jose goes forward with these 2 new players, whereas, I'm getting it right, aren't I? San Jose's got the pick. Whereas Pittsburgh, it just goes on the decline. It doesn't win anything, goes on the decline. Now, the problem in Pittsburgh is not even the top 6. It's not the core. It's not the Letang and Karlsson on defense. The problem in Pittsburgh is the goaltending, just like it was in Toronto for the entire, as soon as Freddie left. You could argue he wasn't great in the playoffs, but Campbell, Sammy, even Wall, I mean, who did they have? What goalie did they have that stood on their head that could take them past Florida? Didn't have it. Where was the defense? Didn't have it. Where's Pittsburgh's defense? They've got a goalie who's questionable and 2 forwards who are questionable defensively. That leaves you with 1 defense on each of the top 2 pairings who's going to protect the goalie and 2 bottom pairing defenders who are at league average. It is rare to go deep into the playoffs, let alone win a cup with that kind of defensive setup. Now, people will argue, well, Vegas won a cup and their goaltender was the 4th string. But the defenders could do everything. They were solid top to bottom. Pittsburgh does not have that. They have a couple of defensive guys. They have 2 high-scoring guys who can't defend and 2 on the bottom pairing who are average. For me, that overall situation is why I would not personally, okay, you're not a GM, blah, blah, whatever. It's our prerogative as a fan to think about these things. The strategy is interesting, that's why I do this. For me, I would not have traded those 2 picks for Karlsson. You're even looking at dumping the players who were on bad contracts, and you're thinking, well, that's great, we dumped them, and we got Karlsson back, it's amazing. But you've mortgaged the future to do it. It's not free. Like, everyone's like, oh, we got Karlsson and we got rid of our bad contracts, that's amazing. It's cost you. There's always a cost. And I don't see success for the team immediately in the next 2 years. I don't see it in the third and fourth year for sure. Again, goaltending, defense, it's not there. Age, right? And then you put yourself in a position where you didn't win anything and you don't have those 2 draft picks coming up. So I don't like it. And I'm going on record. If anyone wants to argue this in the future or now, I'm on record on my YouTube channel in my new house. Sorry, I haven't made a studio or anything, but it's not about a show. It's about thinking about these things. Let me have a quick look and see what else I've got here for you. Yeah, Toronto was the same. I mean, Dubas is too eager. This is my problem. And he was too eager with Tavares. And he was all excited, and everyone got all excited about Tavares, and wasn't this an amazing signing? And I said, no, we need a goalie. Well, we have Freddie. We need a defense. We need a Victor Hedman, not a Morgan Riley, who, by the way, he signed until the age of 35 at 7.5, and the guy scores like 3 goals a year. Whatever. It's short-sighted, okay? All right. And to finish, yeah, the other thing is Dubas said, oh, I was losing sleep because I was afraid someone else was going to get Karlsson. This is a position of desperation, and it's not a clever, slow, well-thought-through plan. It's like, oh, I'll jig the books, get within the cap, and I'll get Karlsson and look like the hero. I'm sorry, guys. It's not going to work out unless Jari stands on his head. And I said the same thing with Toronto. Unless Sammy stands on his head and gets us to the conference final, getting Ryan O'Reilly and Chiari and who else did he get? Lafferty was a waste of picks. He wasted a first and a second and a third and God knows what else. You know, Ryan O'Reilly's gone. I would say the other thing is your bottom 2 lines are interesting, especially with Chiari. That's a really, really good pickup by Dubas. I give him full credit for that. Chiari was brilliant in the playoffs for us. He was better than our core. Big bang for the buck for the money. Love this kind of player. You want a team full of guys who play like him. I mean, sometimes you need more skill. So your bottom 6 will be interesting, but again, I don't think you have the defense or the goaltending. I think you've wasted a first and a second round pick. Dubas wasted 6 of them in Toronto. Pens fans are all excited. Reality will settle in when you're out of in the first round of the playoffs next year, and you're out in the first round of the playoffs the year after, or don't even make it, because you don't have the goaltending or the defense, and you're old. But the regular season might be fun.